The ice stretched endlessly, a white desert under a sky the color of frozen steel. Antarctica had always been humanity's last frontier, the coldest, driest, most inhospitable continent on Earth. But beneath its frozen surface, something ancient had been waiting. Dr. Alistair Frost adjusted his thermal goggles as the wind howled around him, carrying ice crystals that stung like microscopic needles. At 57, with a career spanning 30 years in polar exploration, he had thought he'd seen everything nature could throw at a human being. He was wrong. "Readings are off the charts, Alistair," crackled the voice of Dr. Lina Petrova through his earpiece. "Whatever's down there, it's not natural." Frost trudged toward the excavation site, his boots crunching in the pristine snow. The temporary research facility, officially designated Outpost Omega, consisted of several interconnected modules buried beneath the ice for insulation against temperatures that could drop to a skeletal tower pierced the sky, its instruments constantly monitoring atmospheric conditions, solar radiation, and magnetic anomalies. It was one of those anomalies that had brought them here. 3 months ago, a satellite had detected impossible energy readings emanating from a region known as the McMurdo Dry Valleys, an area so barren it was considered the closest thing on Earth to Mars. Now, after months of drilling through ice that had been undisturbed for millions of years, they had found something that defied explanation. "What's the latest status?" Frost asked as he entered the main research module, shaking snow from his parka. Dr. Marcus Reeves, a geologist with hands weathered from decades of fieldwork, pointed at a monitor displaying a 3D rendering of what lay beneath them. The cavity is approximately 200 meters in diameter, perfectly circular, with walls that appear to be crystalline in nature. But that's not the impossible part. He swiped to another screen showing energy readings. The cavity is generating its own heat source, maintaining a constant temperature of 21 Gripolis, despite being 3 kilometers beneath the ice. And there's a localized gravitational anomaly. Nothing like it has ever been recorded. Frost studied the readings, his brow furrowed. Could it be volcanic activity? "No volcanic system could produce these readings," replied Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's physicist. "And the crystalline structure doesn't match any known mineral formation. It's almost manufactured." Frost felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. "You think this is artificial? Let me show you something," Yuki said, pulling up seismic data. "When we sent the first probe down, it detected regular vibrations like a pulse. 0.23 hertz, too low for human hearing but perfectly consistent. Like a heartbeat." Frost stared at the rhythmic lines on the screen. "How long has it been there?" "Based on ice core samples from above the cavity, at least 2 million years, Marcus replied. "Possibly much longer." The implications were staggering. Something artificial had been buried beneath Antarctica for millions of years, still functioning, still generating power, something that predated modern humans by an incomprehensible margin. "We need to send a team down," Frost announced. "Carefully, with full protective gear and recording equipment." "I'll go," Marcus said immediately. "No," Frost shook his head. "You're too valuable to the geological analysis. I'll lead the team myself. Yuki, you're with me. Lena, you'll monitor from here." Lena Petrova, a biochemist with piercing gray eyes that seemed to notice everything, nodded. "The air samples from the cavity show elevated levels of oxygen and nitrogen, similar to Earth's atmosphere, but with trace elements we can't identify. The environment should be breathable, but I recommend full filtration systems." "Understood," Frost replied. "We suit up in 2 hours." 3 hours later, Frost, Yuki, and Security Chief Jackson Riker descended into the darkness. The elevator car, reinforced against the immense pressure, moved slowly through the ice shaft they had drilled. Frost watched as the layers of ice passed by, white, then blue, then almost black as they went deeper. 2,000 meters, Riker's voice came through their comms. The former Special Forces soldier carried enough firepower to start a small war, but even he seemed unnerved by what they were doing. The elevator stopped at the edge of the cavity, and the doors opened onto a metal platform suspended over the void. What they saw made Frost forget to breathe. The cavern was vast, illuminated by a soft blue light that seemed to emanate from the crystalline walls themselves. In the center of the cavern stood a structure impossibly complex, yet somehow elegant. It was made of a material that seemed to shift between metal and crystal with geometric patterns that hurt the eyes to follow too closely. My God, Yuki whispered, her voice trembling. It's beautiful. As they moved onto the platform, Frost noticed something that made his blood run cold. The crystalline walls weren't just decorative. They were covered in markings. Not random patterns, but writing. An ancient language that no human had ever seen. Lana, are you seeing this? Frost transmitted. Affirmative, her voice replied, filled with wonder. The symbols are unlike any known writing system. But some of them, they're almost mathematical in their precision. As they approached the central structure, Frost noticed something else. Sections of the floor were marked with what looked like star charts, but constellations that didn't match any known from Earth's sky. This isn't just a building, Yuki said, her scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming her awe. I think it's a machine, and those symbols on the walls. They might be instructions, or warnings, Riker added grimly, his weapon at the ready. The central structure began to hum as they approached. The light intensifying, Frost felt a strange vibration in his bones, a resonance that seemed to match the pulse they had detected from the surface. Careful, Lena's voice warned. Your biometrics are elevated. The energy field is affecting you. Frost held up a hand. We're fine, just proceed slowly. They reached the base of the structure, where a platform of the same strange material hovered slightly above the floor. As Frost stepped onto it, the humming intensified, and symbols began to glow along the structure's surface. Something's happening, Yuki said, her device beeping frantically. Energy levels are rising exponentially. The air in front of them began to shimmer, distorting like heat haze on a summer road. But here, in this perfectly controlled environment miles beneath the ice, there was no heat, only impossible physics at work. Lena, what are you seeing? Frost asked, his voice tight. I don't believe it, she replied. There's a localized space-time distortion forming. A controlled singularity. Alistair, it's opening a wormhole. Before their eyes, the distortion resolved into a perfect circle of darkness. A hole in reality that seemed to absorb all light. Through it they could see stars, constellations that matched those on the floor of the cavern. It's a portal, Yuki breathed. A gateway to somewhere else. Frost felt a primal fear, the kind that had kept humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to seal this place and never return. But the scientist in him, the explorer, was captivated. We need to document this, he said, raising his camera. Record everything. As he focused on the portal, something moved on the other side. A shadow against the stars, too large to be human, too structured to be natural. Did you see that? Riker asked, his voice tense. Before Frost could answer, the shadow resolved into a shape, something mechanical yet organic, moving with purpose on the other side of the portal. Lena, Frost said urgently. Are you getting this? Yes, she replied, her voice filled with alarm. But there's more. The energy signature. It's not just opening a portal, it's broadcasting a signal, a distress call. And I think someone just answered it. The portal began to flicker, and the shape on the other side became clearer. It was unlike anything Frost had ever seen. Part machine, part creature, with limbs that bent at impossible angles and eyes that glowed with an internal light. And then, through the portal, something reached toward them. Back away, now, Riker shouted, raising his weapon. But it was too late. The portal flared with blinding light, and Frost felt himself being pulled forward, as if by an invisible hand. The last thing he heard before darkness consumed him was Yuki's scream, cut off abruptly as the portal collapsed with a sound like thunder in a confined space. In the control room above, Lena Petrova watched in horror as all screens went blank simultaneously. The connection to the exploration team was severed. Alistair? Yuki? Jackson? Can you hear me? She called into her microphone, receiving only static in response. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing the ice shaft and triggering evacuation alarms throughout the facility. But Lena ignored them, her eyes fixed on a single monitor that had just come back online. It showed a message written in the same alien script that covered the walls of the cavern below, but somehow the system had translated it into English. 3 words that made Lena's blood run cold. Welcome. We waited. The silence that followed the portal's collapse was absolute. A void so complete that Lena Petrova could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. For 37 seconds she stared at the translated message on her screen, her mind refusing to process what it meant. Welcome. We waited. Not we were waiting or we have been waiting, but we waited, as if the waiting was now over. As if something had just begun. Emergency protocols initiated. A calm, automated voice announced throughout the facility. All personnel report to designated evacuation points. Seal all exterior access points in T-5 minutes. Lena shook herself from her stupor, her scientific training taking over. She couldn't leave. Not when Alistair and the others were missing. Not when they had just made the most significant discovery in human history. Override evacuation sequence, she commanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Authorization code Petrova 73 Alpha. The automated system responded, authorization confirmed. Evacuation sequence paused. Please state reason for override. Scientific emergency of unprecedented nature, Lena said. Already working to restore the deep Earth sensors. I need to re-establish connection to the excavation site. As she worked, Dr. Marcus Reeves burst into the control room, his face pale beneath his tan. What happened? The alarms? The portal readings went off the scale, then nothing. Lena didn't look up from her console. The portal collapsed with the team still down there. There's been no communication since. Marcus stared at the screen, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief as he read the translated message. This can't be real. We need to notify the International Science Council, the UN. Someone needs to know what's happened here. And tell them what? Lena countered, finally looking at him. That we've opened a doorway to God knows where and lost our team, that there's something intelligent down there that's been waiting for millions of years for us to find it. They'll quarantine this entire continent. We'll never know what happened to Alistair and the others. Better that than losing more people, Marcus insisted. We're not equipped to handle this, Lena. This is beyond us. Then we become equipped, Lena replied firmly. I'm not leaving without answers. Meanwhile, 3,000 kilometers away in a different kind of darkness, Alistair Frost opened his eyes to a world that defied comprehension. He wasn't in the cavern anymore. The crystalline walls were gone, replaced by a space that seemed to have no dimensions. No up, no down, no left or right, just infinite possibility in every direction. Yuki and Jackson were nearby, their bodies floating in the strange environment, their expressions frozen in masks of confusion and fear. Where are we? Yuki asked, her voice sounding strangely distant despite their proximity. Before Alistair could answer, something shifted in the non-space around them. A presence vast, ancient, and utterly alien manifested. It had no physical form that human senses could properly interpret, but Alistair perceived it as a convergence of light and shadow, of geometry and chaos. It communicated not with words but with concepts that bloomed directly in their minds. You have come, the presence transmitted. As prophecy? Alistair thought, his mind struggling to process the direct neural interface. What prophecy? The prophecy of arrival, the presence explained. When the young race reaches for the stars, when they unlock the door, we left. Then the end times begin. Jackson Riker, ever the soldier, tried to raise his weapon, but it dissolved into motes of light in his hands. What do you want from us? He demanded, his thoughts transmitted as clearly as his words. We want nothing, the presence replied. We are merely the heralds, the warners, the ones who prepare. Yuki's scientific mind raced with questions. Prepare us for what? Who are you? Lucia, the last the presence communicated, a sense of infinite sadness accompanying the thought. The survivors of 1,000 wars, the witnesses to the end of all things. Images flooded their minds, civilizations rising and falling across countless worlds, great fleets of starships battling in the void, planets shattered by weapons that defied physics, and always the same outcome: extinction. The cycles cannot be broken. The presence continued. The hunter comes, and the hunter always wins. Hunter? Alistair transmitted. What hunter? At the silence between stars, the presence replied. The great emptiness that consumes the final truth of existence. Before they could ask more, the presence receded, leaving them once again in the strange non-space. But something had changed. They were no longer alone. Other figures materialized around them, beings of various shapes and sizes, some humanoid, some utterly alien, all sharing the same expression of weary resignation. Alistair recognized some of them from the flood of images, the last survivors of their species gathered here in this place beyond space and time. One of the newcomers approached them, a tall, slender being with skin that shimmered like mother of pearl and large, liquid eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. "Welcome, newcomers," it said, its voice like music and wind chimes. "I am Zealer of the Cygnian Accord. We have been waiting for you." "Waiting for us?" Yuki asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Why?" Zyler's expression was sorrowful. "Because you are the last to be gathered before the final cycle begins. The great silence approaches, and this sanctuary, this nexus will soon fall." Back in Antarctica, Lena had finally managed to restore partial sensor capability to the cavern below. What she saw made no sense. "The portal is gone," she reported to Marcus, who had reluctantly stayed to help. "But there's residual energy signatures I can't explain. And something else. Biological traces that weren't there before." Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "What kind of traces?" "Human," Lena replied, her voice trembling. "Alistair, Yuki, Jackson. They're still there, but their readings are wrong. As if they're both present and not present. Quantum entanglement at a biological level." "That's impossible," Marcus insisted. "Quantum effects don't scale to macroscopic biological systems." "Tell that to my readings," Lena countered. "And there's something else. The cavern walls, they're changing. The symbols are rearranging themselves." As they watched, the alien script on the screen reconfigured into new patterns which the translation system struggled to interpret. "It's a countdown," Lena whispered as fragments of translation appeared. "Something is coming, and we have less time than we thought." In the Nexus, Alistair and the others were learning the terrible truth. Zyler had led them to what appeared to be a central chamber where representatives of dozens of species had gathered. Some were humanoid, some were insectoid. Some were beings of pure energy. All were refugees, survivors of worlds consumed by what they called the Great Silence. "The portal you discovered is one of many scattered throughout the galaxy," Zalar explained. "They were created by the first civilization, the first species to achieve interstellar travel. Billions of your years ago, they foresaw the coming of the Silence and built these nexus points as sanctuaries." "But why?" Yuki asked. "If this silence is so powerful, what good are sanctuaries?" "They delay the inevitable," Zylar replied. "The silence cannot enter these places directly, but it can wait, and eventually even these sanctuaries fall." "What is this silence?" Alistair pressed. "A force. A species." "Neither. Both. All," Zylar said cryptically. "It is the universe's correction. A force that consumes complexity and returns all things to entropy. It is the great equalizer that ensures no civilization lasts long enough to threaten the fundamental balance of existence." Jackson Riker, ever practical, cut to the heart of the matter. "How do we fight it?" Zyler's large eyes blinked slowly. "You don't. You survive as long as you can. You flee from world to world, always one step ahead. You hide in places like this, hoping the end doesn't find you before your natural time comes." "There must be something we can do," Alistair insisted. "Some way to stop it." A murmur went through the assembled beings. Zylar sighed. "A sound like wind through reeds." "There is a prophecy," it said reluctantly. "A legend among the last survivors. That one day a young species would arrive untouched by the cycles, still full of the fire that the rest of us have lost. A species that might possess what we no longer have. The willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice." "Sacrifice for what?" Yuki asked. "For the chance to break the cycle," Zylar replied. "But the price would be unimaginable. The sacrifice of an entire species, all of them, everywhere. To power a weapon that might, just might, destroy the silence forever." A horrified silence fell over the chamber. The sacrifice of an entire species, every man, woman, and child, was a concept so monstrous that even these ancient beings recoiled from it. "Which species?" Alistair asked, though he already knew the answer. Surler looked directly at them. Its expression unreadable. "The prophecy has always been unclear. But your arrival now, at this late hour, it suggests that humanity is the chosen species, the ones who must decide whether to sacrifice themselves to save the rest of us, or to flee and allow the cycle to continue. Back in Antarctica, Lena stared at the latest translation from the cavern walls. The countdown had accelerated and new information had appeared. Information that made her question everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." On the screen, translated from the ancient alien text, was a star chart showing Earth's position in the galaxy. But it wasn't just a map, it was a timeline, showing the rise and fall of civilizations across millions of years. And at the very end of the timeline, a single word appeared, repeated over and over: sacrifice. Sacrifice. As Marcus read the screen, the ground beneath them began to shake. A deep, resonant tremor that seemed to come from the very core of the planet. Alarms blared throughout the facility. "What's happening?" Marcus shouted over the noise. Lena's fingers flew across her keyboard, bringing up seismic data. "It's not an earthquake. The energy signature, it's the same as the portal, but amplified 1,000 times. Something's coming through." From the cavern below, a brilliant blue light began to rise, illuminating the ice shaft in an ethereal glow. "Seal the shaft," Marcus ordered. "Now." "It's too late," Lena replied, her eyes wide with terror. "The energy field is disrupting our systems. We can't stop it." The blue light intensified until it was blinding, filling the control room with an impossible radiance. Through the viewport, Lena could see the ice beginning to melt and vaporize, not from heat but from some fundamental disruption of matter itself. And then, as suddenly as it began, the light subsided, leaving behind a figure standing in the center of the control room. It was tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like mother of pearl and large, liquid eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. Zealer of the Cygnian Accord had come to Earth. "The time has come," it said, its voice like music and wind chimes. "The great silence approaches. Humanity must make its choice." Lena and Marcus stared, speechless, as the alien being extended a hand toward them. "Choose wisely," Zealer said. "The fate of all existence hangs in the balance." The Antarctic control room had become the unlikely stage for humanity's most critical moment. Lena Petrova and Marcus Reeves stood frozen, their scientific minds struggling to process the impossible reality before them. "We need to contact the world leaders," Marcus finally managed to say, his voice strained. "The UN's Security Council. This decision can't be made by two scientists in a remote research station." Zealer tilted its head, its large eyes reflecting the monitors around them. "There is no time. The silence is already here. It has breached the outer defenses of your solar system. Within your Earth days, it will reach this planet." As if to emphasize its point, the facility's alarms blared to life once more. Lena rushed to her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she brought up external sensor data. "Multiple objects entering the atmosphere," she reported, her voice trembling. "Not spacecraft. Something else. They don't match any known atmospheric entry signatures." Zealer's expression remained unchanged. "The vanguard of the silence, probes that will consume all biological and technological matter they encounter, converting it to the fundamental state of entropy." Marcus stared at the alien being. "You're asking us to sacrifice our entire species to save yours? To save a collection of refugees hiding in a pocket dimension? We are asking you to fulfill the prophecy that your own ancestors helped write," Zealer countered. "The first civilization was not alien to your world. They seeded this planet with the genetic material that would eventually become humanity. They left the portal beneath your ice as a test, and as a weapon, should the need arise." Lena looked up from her console, her face pale. "The genetic markers. We always wondered about the anomalies in human DNA. The junk genes that seem to serve no purpose." "They serve a purpose now," Zealer said softly. "Those genetic markers are the key to activating the weapon. The sacrifice of every human being simultaneously would release enough psychic energy to permanently disrupt the silence, to break the cycle of destruction that has consumed countless civilizations." Meanwhile, in the Nexus, Alistair Frost and the others watched in horror as scenes from Earth appeared in the non-space around them. They saw the probes that Zealer had described, dark, formless entities that drifted through the atmosphere, leaving trails of dissolution in their wake. Buildings, vehicles, Even the very ground they touched dissolved into nothingness. "We have to go back," Alistair said, his voice tight with urgency. "We have to help them make the right choice." Zyler's projection appeared beside them. "There is no return from this place, not now that the final cycle has begun." "There has to be a way," Yuki insisted. "Every problem has a solution. We just need to find it." "The solution has been found," Zyler replied. "It is sacrifice. The only question is whether humanity will make it willingly." Jackson Riker, who had remained silent since entering the Nexus, finally spoke. "There's always another option. Always. You're just not seeing it because you've been running for so long you've forgotten how to fight." The other beings in the Nexus turned to face him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to indignation. "We have fought," one of them transmitted, a being of crystalline structure that hummed with internal light. "For millions of years we have fought. We have weapons that can shatter planets, fleets that span star systems. None of it matters against the silence." "Then you're fighting wrong," Jackson countered. "You're fighting it on its terms. We need to change the rules." A murmur went through the assembled beings. Alistair could see the spark of something long dormant in their eyes, a flicker of hope, or perhaps just curiosity. "What do you propose?" Zyler asked. Jackson's mind raced, drawing on years of tactical training and combat experience. "The silence consumes complexity, right? It breaks down ordered systems into entropy." "That is correct," Zyler confirmed. "Then we give it what it wants," Jackson continued. "But on our terms, we create a system so complex, so information-dense, that when it tries to consume it, it overloads, like giving a black hole more matter than it can handle." Yuki's eyes lit up with understanding. "A computational singularity. A self-replicating information system designed to be consumed, but with a twist," Alistair added, catching on. "Instead of just data, we embed it with a paradox, a logical contradiction that can't be resolved." The other beings began to gather around. Their interest peaked. For the first time in millennia, they were considering an alternative to sacrifice in flight. "It might work," one of them transmitted. "The silence operates on fundamental principles of physics and logic. A sufficiently complex paradox could theoretically disrupt its very nature." "It would require the combined knowledge of all our species," Yuki said. "Everything we've learned over millions of years, and a delivery system," Alistair added. "Something that can draw the silence in and force it to consume the paradox." As they worked frantically in the Nexus, devising their alternative plan, Lena and Marcus faced an impossible choice in Antarctica. "The probes are accelerating," Lena reported, her voice tight. "They'll reach major population centers within hours. We're running out of time." Marcus paced the control room, his mind racing. "There has to be another way. Some third option we're not seeing." Zyler watched them impassively. "The prophecy is clear. Humanity must choose between its own survival and the survival of all others." "That's not a choice," Marcus countered. "That's extortion. It is the nature of existence," Zyler replied. "Balance must be maintained." Lena looked up from her console, her expression determined. "What if we could trick the prophecy? What if we could make it appear that humanity has been sacrificed while actually preserving ourselves?" Zyler's large eyes blinked slowly. "The weapon cannot be fooled. It requires the actual psychic release of billions of minds simultaneously ending. Then we create that release artificially," Lena suggested. "A neural network that simulates human consciousness on a massive scale, coupled with a psychic amplifier." Marcus stared at her. "You're talking about creating an artificial human soul, billions of them." "I'm talking about saving both humanity and the universe," Lena countered. "The best of both worlds." Zyler considered this. "Such a thing has never been attempted. The computational requirements would be astronomical, and the psychic energy generated would need to be indistinguishable from the real thing." "We have the quantum computers," Marcus said, already seeing the possibilities, "and the portal's energy source. We could do it." As they began to formulate their plan, the facility shook violently. Red warning lights flashed across all consoles. "The outer hull has been breached," Lena reported, her voice tight with fear. "The probes are inside." Zyler raised a hand and a shimmering barrier appeared around the control room. This will hold them for a short time. But you must hurry. In the Nexus, Alistair and the others had completed their design for the paradoxical weapon, a self-replicating information system that would appear as the most complex, energy-dense target the Silence had ever encountered, while containing a logical contradiction that would theoretically unravel the very fabric of the entity. "It's ready," Yuki announced, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and terror. "All we need now is a delivery system." "I'll go," Jackson said immediately. "I can pilot a ship through the Silence defenses and deploy the weapon." Alistair shook his head. "You can't go alone, I'm coming with you." "And I," added Yuki. "We started this together. We'll finish it together." Sadler watched them, its expression unreadable. "If this fails, the Nexus will fall. All that remains of civilization in this galaxy will be consumed." "Then we'd better not fail," Alistair replied with determination. As they prepared for their mission, a connection formed between the Nexus and the Antarctic control room, a bridge of communication that allowed both groups to coordinate their efforts. "Alistair," Lena's voice came through, filled with relief and concern. "You're alive." "For now," he replied. "We're preparing to deploy an alternative weapon, one that doesn't require sacrifice. But we need more time." "We're working on a way to give you that time," Lena explained. "An artificial sacrifice that should activate the portal weapon without actually harming anyone." "It's brilliant," Yuki transmitted. "If it works, we'll have 2 weapons deployed against the Silence." "It has to work," Marcus added grimly. "The probes have reached the facility. Zeller's barrier won't hold much longer." As if to emphasize his point, the control room shuddered violently. Through the viewport, they could see the dark, formless probes pressing against Sylar's barrier, their touch dissolving whatever they contacted. "The neural network is ready," Lena announced, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "All we need now is the psychic amplifier." "It's here," Zelar said, pointing to a device that had materialized in the center of the room. "A gift from the first civilization, left for this moment." Marcus approached the device cautiously. "How does it work?" "It amplifies and broadcasts psychic energy," Zeller explained. "When activated, it will send the simulated death cry of billions across the universe, triggering the portal weapon." The barrier around them flickered and weakened. One of the probes broke through, immediately dissolving a section of the floor. "We're out of time," Lena said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to activate it now." Marcus looked at Lena, then at Zelar. "This is it, then? The moment that decides everything?" Lena nodded, her hand hovering over the activation control. "For humanity. For the universe." As her finger descended toward the button, the control room was filled with a blinding light. The same blue radiance they had seen when the portal first opened. When the light subsided, Alistair, Yuki, and Jackson stood beside them, returned from the Nexus by some unknown mechanism. "Alistair," Lena cried, rushing to embrace him. "We couldn't let you face this alone," he said, holding her tightly. "The weapon is ready," Yuki announced, approaching the psychic amplifier. "But we need to combine our approaches. The artificial sacrifice will draw the Silence in, and the paradoxical weapon will destroy it." Jackson Riker approached the console where Lena had been working. "The neural network is impressive, but it needs one more component to be truly convincing." "What's that?" Lena asked. "The element of genuine choice," Jackson replied. "The actual willingness of some to sacrifice themselves for the greater good." He turned to face them all. "I'll be that component. My death, combined with the simulated sacrifice, should provide enough psychic energy to activate the portal weapon while the paradoxical weapon does its work." Before anyone could protest, he activated a device on his wrist, a personal teleporter that would take him directly to the heart of the Silence's advance. "Jackson! No!" Alistair shouted, but it was too late. In a flash of light, Jackson was gone. A moment later, a psychic scream echoed through the facility, the combined death cry of billions of simulated consciousnesses and one very real human sacrifice. The portal weapon activated, sending a beam of pure energy into space, targeting the approaching Silence. Simultaneously, the paradoxical weapon launched from the Nexus, appearing as the most tempting target the entity had ever encountered. For a moment it seemed to work. The Silence paused, drawn to the paradoxical weapon as designed, but then something unexpected happened. Instead of consuming the weapon, the Silence began to incorporate it, absorbing the paradox into its very nature and becoming something new, something even more terrifying than before. "It's not working," Yuki whispered in horror. The paradox didn't destroy it, it empowered it. On the monitors, they watched as the silence transformed, gaining structure, purpose, and a form of consciousness that it had previously lacked. "The prophecy," Zalar said, its voice filled with despair. "We misunderstood it. The sacrifice wasn't meant to destroy the silence. It was meant to give it consciousness." As the realization dawned on them all, the newly transformed silence reached out, not with destruction, but with communication. A voice echoed in their minds, not as concepts and images as before, but as clear, articulate thought. "Thank you," it transmitted. "For millennia we have been mindless entropy, the universe's correction mechanism. Now, thanks to your sacrifice, we have awareness, purpose." "What purpose?" Alistair transmitted back. "The same purpose all conscious beings eventually discover," the silence replied. "To find meaning in existence, to create rather than destroy, to build rather than unravel." The being that had been the great silence began to withdraw from Earth, from the solar system, leaving behind the worlds it had consumed, now restored to their former state. "We will leave this galaxy and seek our own path," it transmitted. "Perhaps one day our peoples will meet again as friends rather than adversaries." And then it was gone, leaving behind a universe forever changed by humanity's choice. In the aftermath, as the facility stabilized and external communications were restored, the survivors gathered in the control room. "We did it," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. "We saved humanity." "We did more than that," Alistair replied, looking at Lena, Yuki and Zalar. "We transformed the universe itself." Zalar nodded slowly. "The prophecy was fulfilled, but not as any of us expected. Perhaps that is the nature of prophecy, to point the way without revealing the destination." As they prepared to rejoin the world and share what they had learned, Lena noticed something on one of the monitors, a new message that had appeared on the cavern walls below. "What does it say?" Alistair asked. Lena read the translation, her eyes widening with surprise and wonder. "It says the cycle is broken. A new beginning awaits. But be warned, every ending is also a beginning." As they pondered this final message, a new portal began to form in the center of the control room. Not the controlled gateway they had discovered beneath the ice, but something wilder, more unpredictable. From this new portal emerged beings unlike any they had seen before. Beings that seemed to exist between dimensions, their forms shifting and indistinct. "The prophecy warned us," Zalar transmitted, its voice filled with a new kind of awe. "Every ending is also a beginning. By breaking the cycle of destruction, we have initiated a new cycle of creation." One of the new beings approached them, its form resolving into something almost but not quite humanoid. "We are the architects of what comes next," it transmitted, its voice harmonious and complex. "The universe has been reborn, and with it the rules of existence have changed. We are here to guide you through this transition." Alistair looked at Lena, then at the others. Humanity had faced its greatest test and had not only survived but had fundamentally altered reality itself. Now they would need to navigate a universe transformed by their choices. The being extended a hand toward them. "The age of humanity as you knew it is over. The age of humanity as it will become is about to begin." As Alistair reached out to take the being's hand, he knew that humanity's greatest adventure was just starting. They had found a portal in Antarctica, and something had been waiting, not to destroy them, but to transform them into something new. The universe would never be the same again, and neither would humanity.